This episode is brought to you by the Catholic Family Emergency Binder.
Life comes with seasons of joy and seasons of storms. For our family, the storm hit last year as my dad died from cancer. Being prepared for the financial storm allowed us to be fully present for the emotional one. Learn how in this episode of The Catholic Money Show.
Plane tickets, coordinating family travel, funeral expenses, RV travel. There was a lot of expenses this last year. And managing all of those little details could have proved overwhelming.
Yes.
But we had something to lean on in the storm. We had the ultimate of umbrellas. Maybe not ultimate, but we had our full rainy day fund going into this storm of life. And today we're going to talk about how following the money milestones and getting your full rainy day fund established can give your family the freedom to focus on what matters most in those hard chapters of life. When the storm hit, we had the umbrella ready to pull it out, and it made all the difference for our family this last year. So how are you preparing for the unexpected? What does putting faith and family first during a time of trial look like? How can you create your own umbrella to shelter you and your loved ones when the storm hits? All that and more we are going to discuss today in the episode.
Yes. So we'll start by talking a little bit about just what happened, our story, how we went through this, and then we'll pull out, the big ideas, the lessons, the tips, the strategies, so you can do it in your own.
Yeah.
So
Let's tell the story. What, 14 months ago?
Yep, something like that.
And it's crazy how it was just this immediate, it felt like there was a time before and a time after
Absolutely.
the diagnosis.
Yeah. My parents had just come out here to Nebraska to visit, and then it was a week
Week or
later,
two, max.
got a phone call. My dad saying, "Oh, I've got cancer." I had gone in, had some pain, kind of thought maybe it was just the back. They did a scan. Oh, nope, it's the
Pancreas.
The pancreas. Yep. So very tough cancer to treat. Usually doesn't get found until it's pretty late in the game, which was the case on both of those counts. Wasn't able to be operated on, anything like that, but went through different rounds of chemotherapy, different medicines as part of all that. And just like everything said, just about a year later, he had passed away. So in that year, in a way, it was a blessing because we had a year knowing this is the time to be really intentional.
Yep.
This is the time to go spend a lot of time to say the things you want to say, to do the things you want to do, all that. And we were able to do that through the rainy day fund. And then when things got, right down at the end, that last week, and then everything after the funeral and all that, that certainly was made possible because of the rainy day fund, because we were able to put ourselves there. All the visits and putting some things on the back burner, your wallet went up, the travel expenses, all
Let's talk about it. Let's not rush through kind of some of the things, because people might be wondering, okay, well, great, you had an emergency fund. Like, what did it actually get used towards? And is this a situation where you would use it? I remember years ago, I was coaching somebody and they asked me, a similar situation. One of the people in their marriage, their parents had cancer. And they said, is this something where, we would want to be using the emergency fund to fly back and forth for regular visits? And I said, 100,000%. That's what it's for. That's really what it's for. It's not sitting there. It's for emergencies. If you imagine, sometimes in our heads, we imagine emergencies as like the hot water heater going out. Okay, yeah, but people, these are the highest type of emergencies, these scenarios right here. So right off the get-go, the travel expenses, there was no rule, but I would say every 6 to 8 weeks, you were going back and spending time with your parents. Sometimes our family went too. Pretty early on, we did a road trip out there.
Yeah.
And then road tripped back and made our guardian angels, well, they don't have cortisol. They don't have overwhelmed neurological systems, but
If they had them,
they did, they would have been stressed.
they've been put to the
We
test.
drove right through a storm. What was it called? A winter squall. And we counted like
Yes.
75 cars in the ditch that we just somehow missed
Mm-hmm.
by mere hours. Anyway, that travel, and then you had been traveling, and we've mentioned that on the podcast this
Yes.
last year, you know, the story about when our son James came to us. You were on one of these trips.
Yes, I was.
So every 6 to 8 weeks, you were kind of traveling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that helped make some of that possible. And then just the time and all that. But I'd say where it really came in handy was there at the end, you know, getting a call saying like, hey, I don't think it's going to be too much longer. You might want to get out here. And then I remember right where we were at the pumpkin patch.
Yeah, I remember too.
And it's like, all right, I guess I got to figure out how to get out there. So, you know, went out, all that. And then,
And I will say, just
Yeah.
before you continue,
yeah.
no, at no point that day was our conversation at all, how are you going to pay for this?
Yes, that is definitely
Not
correct.
even a consideration. It was just, how are you going out there?
Yes.
So we knew we had this umbrella. It'd seen us through the storm up to this point, and it was going to continue to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so got out there, and what was wonderful, but it wasn't like, oh, I'll get out there, we got to worry about. No, I wasn't just picking whatever flight or doing first class or anything. You know, didn't even buy a drink on the
No.
plane. You know, there was none of that. Not just like spendy, but was able to just do the things. Right? Oh, here's the flight. Great. All right, great. I'm gonna need a car. Doing the usual thing I use to not overpay. All right, perfect. Now I have the rental car to get up there. All that stuff. But what was really great, it was able to step into that role and to help everything else happen too. So coordinating the travel for you guys, for my brother and his family, just to figure things out and not have to, okay, hey guys, it looks with the schedule and everything, it looks like this flight or this flight's going to work, you know, so pick one of those, do it. And then I could just go, you know what? This flight's going to work for us. Sounds like it works for you. I'm just going to get it for you.
Book
I'm
it
just
for
going to get
everybody.
the thing done.
Yeah.
And then we can move on to the next thing. So that was great. And figuring out the cars, figuring out
Hotels.
the hotel, the meals, the lunch for after the funeral, all those things was just smoother because there was money available to get drawn on. And some of it was going to get paid for by my parents, you know. They're not
Yeah, reimbursing
destitute or
you.
anything.
Yeah,
They've got money to pay for these things, and a lot of it's set aside and all that. But so much easier to just be able to front the money, and then once things calm down, then figure out, all right, how do we put the money back where it needs to go, and what was getting reimbursed and what wasn't, and all that. It was so much easier than, I mean, at that point, there wasn't any talking to my dad. There was no him signing checks or sending a payment on the phone or anything.
Right. I mean,
and
just
my
imagine.
mom isn't in those details. So it's just like,
Yeah, she could not have
we
done
don't
that.
need to bother anybody about these details right now. We are able to make this thing happen. And then the details will settle out. But we had that ability to step in at that time and to take care of things.
Yeah, that was huge. And I can just, imagine how stressful it would be if maybe you didn't have the bandwidth to take on a lot of those expenses and it was, we have to fly out there for the funeral. And I don't know, it would have been really awkward and harmful, I feel, to your parents and just where they were in their health and their grief to have to do something like that. So it was just something where it was easier for everybody if we could just absorb a lot of things. And then after the dust had settled, after everything had been complete at the end, the Texeras could kind of say, okay, here's what we put out of pocket for everything. You know, here's what our family absorbed for just us. Here's what maybe we paid for other expenses for extended family, for luncheons and whatever. Here's just, we could kind of lay it all out. And of course, we meticulously tracked all of this because we are who we
We
are.
made sure we found wheels along the way.
Well, we also had, we had an Excel spreadsheet with all this,
Oh, yeah.
just because that's our nature. That's what we do. We we wanted to know what this looked like. And especially important if we are going to go back to family and say, there's some reimbursements needed. I'm never going to go and say, just give me a lump sum without having the receipts, the proof of here's what it was for.
Okay, well, how much you need? Oh, I don't know. Just write a couple numbers down and add a couple zeros.
No, we wanted to be above board with all of that kind of thing. So we kept track and all of that. And just the fact that we had the money available to absorb a lot of these expenses, even though some of them ended up being reimbursed, it just allowed us to focus on the present. It allowed us to focus on the relationships. And honestly, there just weren't a lot of moments where we were sitting there having anxiety about money. There were few of those. There's a few, because whenever you have those junctures in life where, I don't know, a move, for us, an adoption, and now death, those three things, it feels like the card's about to melt and it's just whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Like on a day in our family life, if you look in the bank account, there might be 5 to 7 transactions that occur. But in those unique windows, there's like 45 on every day for a solid week.
And some of them are quite sizable.
Right.
Which is another thing, maybe not what y'all used to.
Yes. So it's just, again, we needed to track things just for that. But as you're just seeing those types of things going out, the body's reaction is naturally going to be, oh boy. But if I can look and see, okay, great, we're good. And we could always see that there was evidence that we're still okay. We're doing okay here. We're fine. It allowed us to stay focused on the present moment. It allowed us to stay in those relationships.
Yeah, we've been teaching folks this stuff for years and years and years now. And when we talk about fully funded rainy day fund, it's like you're able to focus on the thing that's happening, not on how you are going to figure out how to pay for these things that need to happen.
Right. The last thing you need is a big old fight.
Yes. And that was the experience. We were able to enter into everything that was going on and what different people needed and how to serve them and all that. And we were able to just go into that and be there in everything that was going on instead of always getting pulled out or having, one arm out trying to figure out what was going on the side with all the money and what might happen and what couldn't happen and all that. It was really good. Mm-hmm. And we're sharing this not to toot our own horn or make you, oh yeah, they're so great.
Proof
but just
that it works.
It actually worked. It did what it was supposed to do. And I hope you don't end up in situations like this where you would need it. Financial shocks of one type or another come about every year. So it's probably going to happen. And so I just hope that sharing this can be an inspiration, a kick in the pants, or whatever it might need to be for you to have it in place when you will need it someday, so you can be fully present in whatever situation is going to come up.
Yeah. And I'd say there are financial shocks statistically on an annual basis. And that we've seen that happen. This one felt like one of those once in a decade shocks though.
It's because there's the financial side
so
and
unique.
Just the life side, the emotional shock.
So those,
yes.
But those are still coming for you. Yes. You just don't know, and you don't get to determine when those are going to happen. So it was, again, not tooting our horns, but this stuff works. The Texeras eat our own dog food. And then when we actually...
It sure is good.
When we test it against fire, we want to share with you that, okay, the thing we already knew, the thing we've already been doing, we just went ahead and got even more proof for it. And I want to go ahead and share that story. And let's take a look at our money milestones. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see a picture of those right now. But you can see that of the 12 money milestones, our full rainy day fund is almost right there in the middle. It is number 7. It is in the second financial phase where you're gaining momentum with your money. And we're going to describe exactly what this looks like just in a minute. But it was important that we'd spent the early years of our marriage kind of establishing our financial foundation and learning the skill of budgeting, getting insurance in place, paying debt off, breaking the paycheck to paycheck cycle, etc. And you've heard us say this in a different podcast episode. You're never doing as good as you think you are until you have the full rainy day fund. A lot of people think, I just need to get debt free. I just need to get out of debt, and that will be it. I will have won. But really, you're only one emergency away from going right back into debt, or you're a job loss away from being absolutely anxiety ridden. And you can see clearly through this example, this extreme example that we just lived through this last year, that on the other side of a full rainy day fund, you're just in a much more solid and secure position where you have options, you have time, you're not in some rush, you're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off, you're not fighting and screaming, wondering how you're going to pay for things. It has bought you options and a lot of peace and time to discern, etc. There's no chance this last year that if we didn't have a full rainy day fund that we would have ended up discerning, hey, maybe we could go spend 2 months living in an RV near your parents. There wouldn't have been space. There wouldn't have been any bandwidth to even consider it.
Yeah.
Let alone having you go out there every 4 to 6 weeks. We all wouldn't have been able to take the time off work. It wouldn't have even entered into the conversation if we were on the other side of the full rainy day fund. It just would have looked very different. So again, I just want to encourage people to push on, press on, to continue working down the money milestones. It's worth it. So, all right, let's talk about the full rainy day fund. The umbrella. What is it? We've already talked about kind of that power of it. What is it though?
Well, once you get to that full rainy day fund, right? You had that $1,000 set aside. You've grown your month of money that, if needed, could be used in an emergency situation where you would just go back to being paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
But now you are taking that $1,000. You're not touching the month of money. You're taking that $1,000 starter rainy day fund, and you're going to bring it up, and that's what you're going to grow into 4 to 6 months of expense. That's what you want to have, because you don't just take your monthly budget or your monthly income and go times 4, times 6. You look at, if we're downshifting into it's going down mode, like lost a job mode, well, there's going to be some spending you're going to cut out. Maybe all the streaming services might get cut out. Going out to eat, maybe all that gets cut out. There's different things that you're just going to do a lot more simply when you need to make those dollars stretch. So you're going to figure out kind of that lower level, that downshifted monthly need. And that's what you'll multiply by 4 to 6. Because if something's going on, you're going to go down into that mode. And it is just a helpful rule of thumb for the size of emergencies based on, if you have more people and a bigger house, well, you've got more people and more house that emergencies could happen to. And so that monthly bill, as it grows and gets multiplied, it helps to right size your fund to the emergencies that could be coming your way.
And if anybody is tempted to think, isn't this just isn't this just self-preservation? Is this just not relying on God's providence? Does this fly in the face of trusting the Lord? Absolutely not. Preparation, this is an example of prudence. This is an example of stewardship, preparing for what we know is coming. Emergencies, they are coming. It's just a form of stewardship and fulfilling our financial responsibilities that we have to our family. This enabled us to say yes as fully as possible to our unique vocation in that moment. We were still able to have our business. We were still able to homeschool our children as we had discerned. We were able to carve out additional time with your family during that last year. So this made all of those things possible. God used it in many ways. And so this is not lacking trust in God. This is prudently planning for what he's likely going to send you eventually. You just don't know exactly when it's going to happen.
Yeah. As you were speaking, this idea came to me of that parable of the guy building bigger barns, right? He has it was overabundance in his harvest.
Bumper crop.
There we go. Nebraska girl. The bumper crop. And then the barn's full. Like, well, I guess I'll tear it down and build a bigger one. And then, of course, he dies, you fool. Your life will be, asked of you this night. Oh, what were you doing? The issue wasn't that he had barns. The issue was that he went over and above and beyond what was necessary and normal and expected in his selfishness, and could not, help other people with it, and didn't rely upon the Lord. It wasn't that he had a barn at all, that he was saving some grain at all. It was
overkill.
It was the overkill.
And I have seen people out there recommend that full rainy day funds ought to be a year or two of income. I think that would be an example
That's overkill.
of bigger barns, unless there's some very extraordinary circumstance. I'm sure that could be prudent in a very small amount of
Maybe in that sense,
circumstances.
but if you know that circumstance, you might already be in it.
Maybe. Yeah, I know.
You're not saying it anymore.
Anyway, for most people, this 4 to 6 months range is appropriate. It's enough. Years worth of income just sitting there, not actually active, doing anything, growing, being invested in, etc. Now that is flirting with a lack of prudence or a poor stewardship. That's equivalent maybe of burying the talent in the ground, if you will. So you're striking that right balance. And I do think the 4 to 6 months range is pretty solid for people. Okay, so people are hearing this and they're like, 4 to 6 months? Between inflation and interest rates and housing costs and daycare and Catholic school tuition and, I'm trying to give, where am I getting this hypothetical 4 to 6 months of income just casually set aside, Tixeras? So let's talk about that, because this was not an easy save for us back in the day when we initially established it. And we've had to drain and resave the full rainy day fund many times over. And we're going to talk about what to do when you have to do that.
And the rainy
It's
day, the
frustrating.
first full rainy day fund we built was not the same size as the current rainy day fund we have.
Absolutely not.
That changes in time.
It changes. Yeah, right. Us as a family of 2, our 4 to 6 months looked a whole lot different from a family of 6.
Yes.
So that's challenging as well. And we always, inside of our Catholic money course, we talk about how this money milestone can be the most boring and frustrating one, because there's not those instant gratifications, instant wins of, I signed up for the insurance policy, I paid off a debt. Yeah, it doesn't come with that. You're just saving and you're hoping that you never need it. And sometimes that feels a little anticlimactic. And there's ways to gamify it and make it a little bit fun. We can talk about that. But really, what you need to do to get started going with this. Don't try to do it too early. It's money milestone number 7 for a reason.
Yes.
Sometimes people try to do this first before they do anything else because they feel like they need a financial moat around them. And at the end of the day, because they don't have the skill of budgeting and because they're still in debt, it just hacks away at and sabotages it. And any progress they make, they have to undo. And then they get frustrated and want to be tempted to say things like, there's always emergencies, or saving doesn't work, and then they just abandon it altogether. So really, you need to go through the money milestones. So if you're not at the place where you're ready for milestone number 7, go back and begin working through them. We wrote a book a couple of years ago, and it details every one of these money milestones. We also have an online course where we go in depth into every single one of these money milestones. So if this is something that you want to figure out, where am I in these and how can I make progress to make sure I'm in a spot where I'm really ready for the rainy day fund, the full one, go through one of those resources. We'll provide a link down in the show notes. Okay, so let's assume you're ready. You've done all the things. You're at money milestone number 7. Here we go. You just have to start somewhere. And I would encourage you in that monthly budget, creating it for that next month, put down all the money that is for the necessities, all of the bills that you've got to pay, the things that you know you have coming, the things that are just obligations. They're not that changeable. They just are what they are. Then you're going to see a number. It may be small. It may be a larger number. It's maybe somewhere in between. Whatever that amount is, we are hoping to take as much as possible from that number and to sock it over into the full rainy day fund. That's the goal. Of course, we're staying balanced here. You know, you're going to have some date nights. You might have to get a babysitter. Maybe your kids are taking some music lessons. You know, we're balanced here, but we're not going crazy. This is not shark mode like we recommend for getting out of debt.
It's like dolphin mode.
It's more like dolphin mode. They're fun. They're doing flips in the water. They're still going to have some quality of life. But they're getting it done. They're getting after it. And the goal here is to earmark in your budget money that you're going to set aside every month. And the category should be full rainy day fund. And you should already kind of have pre-calculated out what that number is going to be. 4 to 6 months based on your unique situation. Going to be very different if you're a single new college grad who's 24 versus a family of 8 in your mid 40s with kids about to go to college. Very different realities that are going on there financially. So you're going to calculate that. And then what I would recommend immediately after that, and once you've gotten the budget all figured out and you know what you want to send towards that rainy day fund that month, the first chance you get where that money's in the bank account and we're ready to go and it's the new month, we are automatically sending it off to a separate high yield as you can get it, savings account where it is no longer at risk of being spent out of our everyday checking account.
Yep.
We are committing immediately from the beginning of the month because so many people get into this habit of, let's just kind of see how the month goes and then whatever we have left, that's what we'll save. There's never anything left. Nature abhors a vacuum. There will be 1,000 ways that money will be consumed by the end of the month. Something will come for it. That's why you have to get it out of your hands.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Is that true? Did I say it right?
Yes, it's just from that clip.
I made a social media clip where I gave myself like $2,600 in fun money.
Yeah.
Because nature abhors a vacuum and I needed to find a spot for all of it. Okay, continue. I never gave myself that much in real life.
No.
I don't even like fun money.
No, you don't. So you work your way towards this, and a way to maybe get motivated for it, just to think, put yourself with your imagination in that spot of losing a job, of an illness in the family, of something happening to the car or the house, whatever it might be, and just think, oh, how would I feel right now? Okay, well, I would need to be a little bit more prepared, and then go into it, right? Get to where you would be prepared. It's going to be boring, but it's going to be good, and it's going to be really great when you need it. And it'll allow you to get into whatever's going on at that time. Speaking of time, this is a great time to tell you about a little thing that we've got called the Catholic Family Emergency Binder.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Catholic Family Emergency Binder. Jonathan is grabbing that and showing it to all of you who are joining us on YouTube. Essentially, the binder is your go-to. That one has a bunch of tabs highlighted in it.
I know, for easy.
Yeah, for easy clipping. You're going to be able to track all of your relevant information that your family needs to know in times of emergencies, in times of illness, in times of death, in times of crisis. Whenever you need to access the important information all in one spot in 5 minutes or less, that is what the emergency binder is for. It's designed to keep track of all that information, all those details, so that if you are unavailable if somebody else needs to step in, take your place and kind of run your life, whether it be for a day, a week, a month, or if you have passed away for the rest of your life, they'd be able to access that information in one fell swoop in the Catholic Family Emergency Binder.
That's right. And you can get your own at CatholicFamilyEmergencyBinder.com. That's CatholicFamilyEmergencyBinder.com.
And you can choose from either the digital only, where you're going to go ahead and print it off yourself, or we have the physical binder that will come to you, as well as a couple of bonus extra resources and recommendations from us with some video classes.
Right. And in that physical bundle includes a free will. Another good thing to have.
Bada bing, bada boom.
That's CatholicFamilyEmergencyBinder.com. back to you guys. Thanks, Jonathan.
So we talked about building the umbrella,
Yes.
how much it should be, how we actually get it going, how we make sure that money gets out of our hands and is protected away in the rainy day fund category, account, etc., as soon as humanly possible. Now, let's talk about recalibrating after the storm.
Yes. The storm hit. You paid for things. You were present. Now, what do you do? Well, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First, maybe there's some reimbursements that need to happen, and there's probably some work you need to do in order to take care of those. For instance, when we were out living in the RV, to be out there and spend some time with my folks, there was an issue with the RV, and we couldn't be.
Oh, it almost burned us to a crisp inside it.
Like I said, there was a small, really insignificant issue.
Thanks, Jaco.
So it got worked on, and we had to wait a little bit, all that. There's a couple days where we just couldn't really do much because we didn't have power anymore. We couldn't cook. It was so hot, all this. Anyway, part of the insurance was also covering meals, since when the RV's inoperable,
we were still
also
under
your
warranty.
food is inoperable. Yes.
We were under warranty.
What was covered was your meals. So we went out for meals, and we paid that money, and then we had to submit the receipts and the paperwork and even more paperwork and go back and forth over email.
We just
and
got the
then
check last week.
And then get the reimbursements.
How many months?
But it never would have happened if we didn't submit the things, if we didn't keep track of those.
6 months.
Yes. So you need to submit for those reimbursements, whatever that might be, whether it's from a person or a company or a faceless insurance agency, whatever it is.
Right.
So you need to
track all your
process
details.
those.
Make sure you're keeping track of that.
Yes.
Another one would just be in part of that recalibration, starting over doesn't mean failure. When people, there are temperaments that when they see their emergency savings dwindle or evaporate, something inside of them dies and they feel like they failed and screwed up. Instead of the very real reality that they just successfully weathered a huge financial catastrophe without taking on additional harm. It's a success story, really, is what it is. And of course, there's the discouragement of having to rebuild, but never, ever be tempted to think that because you had to use your emergency fund, that somehow you failed. Every time you get to use it is an opportunity to thank our Lord for these resources, thank him for the prudence and the wisdom and the virtue to have set that money aside and not to have consumed every last bit of it. And that you were able to not do that. You were able to actually have the wisdom to put it away. These are moments of gratitude. You're not a failure. You actually have proven that you're a good steward in those circumstances, in those situations. But it is time to get back to refilling it, get back to rebuilding it. And again, I get that feeling. It's a dreaded feeling. We've had to redo it
more times than we'd like.
I don't know. It's very humbling. It can be humbling. It's a little frustrating, but it's just how it goes sometimes. And you just keep going back to the cycle. You can, whatever you've eaten off of the emergency savings, it's not always the whole thing, thankfully. You kind of pause other things, put the blinders up, get the side hustle, whatever you need to do, trim things up, get after it, get it refilled, and then move back into normal life.
That's right. Yeah. It worked the first time. It's going to work again. And it's simple prudence and preparation for your protection. This episode brought to you by the letter P. But the storms will come. Life's going to happen. The good parts and not so good parts. So that maybe once a year shock, and then those, hopefully once every few years, maybe decade mega shocks. I want you to be ready when those come for the financial side of them. And as much as possible, the emotional and all that side of it too. The financial one is one that we maybe have a little bit more power over, a little bit easier to prepare for, because the same money can be used, whatever the situation is that comes up. We were able to prioritize family, to even up until and through the end, invest and value the relationship with my dad. And none of that was weakened or jeopardized because we didn't have to give a second thought to how would this or that be paid for, which is a gift. Because if you know, he would have died 12 years ago when we were just starting out our life together, it would have been very different. So it was a blessing to have that available for us. And I hope that you have it available for you too. So get to work if that's where you are in the money milestones. Let's get that thing saved up. And if you are maybe a little closer to the starting line, the fundamental habit of budgeting is essential for whatever financial goal you might be getting to. And if you're new to that, if that's not a habit that you've fully cultivated yet, well, then head on over to CatholicBudgetGuide.com and get our free guide. It's like a mini class on budgeting, totally free. All we ask is your email so we know where to send the links. So go to CatholicBudgetGuide.com, check the link in the show notes. And until next time.
Bye for now.
This episode was brought to you by the Catholic Family Emergency Binder. Get yours today at CatholicFamilyEmergencyBinder.com.